They dragged Kida to execution in chains that burned her wrists raw, and she was laughing, not from madness, though 3 years in Rourke's dungeons would justify it. Not from fear, though the executioner's axe gleamed silver in torchlight, and every wolf in the pack had gathered to watch her die. She laughed because she finally understood the joke. They thought chains could hold her. They thought Omega meant powerless. They thought a girl covered in scars and blood could be erased with one clean swing of a blade. Alpha King Rourke stood 10 feet away in his ceremonial armor, arms crossed, watching her with those cold eyes that had ordered her torture, her starvation, her breaking. The executioner, a massive brute named Theor, yanked her hair back to expose her throat. The pack roared approval. They'd been waiting for this. The public death of the Omega, who betrayed her king by refusing his bed. The axe rose. Her laughter grew louder. And something ancient in her blood, something the Alphas thought they'd killed centuries ago, woke up and remembered how to fight back. 2 seconds later, Rourke was dead. She was standing, and half the pack was on their knees. The execution platform was ancient wood worn smooth by centuries of blood. Torches burned in a circle, casting flickering shadows across hundreds of faces. The entire northern pack, summoned to witness justice. Except this wasn't justice. This was Rourke, making an example of the Omega, who dared refuse him. Kida knelt on the platform, wrists and ankles in silver chains that suppressed shifter healing. Her body was a map of suffering, whip marks across her back, burns on her ribs, a brand on her shoulder marking her as traitor. 3 years of punishment for saying no to a king who didn't hear that word. 3 years of darkness, starvation, and systematic cruelty designed to break her spirit. But they miscalculated. You can't break what's already been forged in fire. She lifted her eyes, not in submission, but in assessment. Commander Helga stood at Rourke's right, face carefully blank, calculating as always. Audrey, the king's best warrior, shifted uncomfortably in the crowd, hand resting on her sword hilt. Milo, the pack's record keeper, watched with something that might be pity from behind his leather-bound journal. None of them would help her. They never did. The night air smelled of pine smoke and anticipation. Wolves pressed close, jostling for better views, their eyes reflecting torchlight like stars in darkness. Some jeered. Others watched in silence, perhaps remembering their own Omegas locked away for similar crimes. Defiance, resistance, the audacity of saying no. Theor yanked her head back by her matted hair, positioning her throat at the perfect angle. The crowd's roar intensified, a wave of sound that crashed over the platform. Rourke nodded once, permission to proceed. His lips curved in satisfaction. He'd waited 3 years for this moment. 3 years of trying to break her in those dungeons, and she'd never bent. Now, he would erase her entirely. That's when Kida started laughing. Not hysterical, not broken, dark, knowing, almost relieved. The sound cut through the crowd's noise like a blade. Wolves fell silent, confused. Even Theor hesitated, his grip loosening slightly in her hair. "What's funny, Omega?" Rourke's voice cut through the sudden quiet, sharp with irritation. She met his eyes, those eyes that had sentenced her to hell, that had watched her scream in those underground chambers, that had never once shown mercy, and smiled through split lips. Blood stained her teeth. You think I'm afraid of death? I've been dead for 3 years. You just never noticed I climbed back out." Rourke's jaw tightened. A muscle twitched beneath his eye. For the first time in 3 years, uncertainty flickered across his face. "Do it," he commanded Theor, voice harder now, urgent. The executioner hesitated another heartbeat, then raised the axe higher. The crowd held its collective breath. The axe fell, the world slowed, and Kida felt it, the thing she'd felt building in her bones for months, thrumming under her skin like a second heartbeat. The power her grandmother had whispered about before Rourke's soldiers killed her entire family. The magic alphas tried to genocide 3 centuries ago because it made omegas dangerous, because it threatened the natural order they'd built on dominance and subjugation. Moon blessed, the extinct bloodline, except one survived. The chains shattered. Silver light exploded across the platform, blinding and beautiful. Kida moved before conscious thought, her body remembering what her mind had forgotten. Tior's axe was in her hands before he processed she was free. One fluid motion: spin, rise, strike. Muscle memory from 1,000 years of moon blessed warriors flowed through her veins. The blade buried itself in Rourke's chest with a sound like meat splitting. His eyes went wide with shock, with disbelief, with the dawning realization that he'd made a catastrophic mistake. Blood poured over ceremonial armor, black and glistening in torchlight. He reached for the axe handle with trembling fingers, confused, dying, unable to comprehend how an Omega in chains had just killed the most powerful Alpha in the Northern Territories. Kida leaned close enough to smell his last breath, and whispered for his ears alone, "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Rourke dropped to his knees, then collapsed forward onto the blood-soaked wood, dead before he hit the platform. The pack went silent. The most powerful Alpha in the Northern Territories lay dead on his own execution platform, and the Omega he'd tried to murder stood in his blood, holding the weapon, glowing with silver light that shouldn't exist. Her chains lay shattered at her feet, her scars blazed silver beneath torn fabric. Her eyes burned with 3 years of fury finally unleashed. "Anyone else?" Kida's voice echoed across the stunned crowd, carrying power that made wolves whimper and alphas take involuntary steps backward. No one moved. No one breathed. Even Helga stood frozen, hand on her sword but making no move to draw it. Audrey stared, with something like awe. Milo's journal hung forgotten in his grip. The revolution had just started, born in laughter and blood on an execution platform under the full moon's witness. And the Omega they'd tried to erase was just beginning. The guards came for Kida at dawn. Iron-reinforced boots echoed down stone corridors, keys jangling against belts. She heard them 3 cells away and sat up on the filthy straw, chains rattling at her wrists and ankles. 3 years in these dungeons had taught her to identify each guard by footstep alone. These were Rourke's personal enforcers, the ones who enjoyed their work. The cell door crashed open. Rough hands yanked her upright, dragging her toward the stairs before her legs could properly support her weight. The silver chains burned where they touched skin, suppressing her shifter healing, keeping her weak, keeping her human. "Move, traitor," one guard snarled, shoving her forward. Kida didn't resist. She climbed, one agonizing step at a time, feeling each old wound protest. Her body was a map of Rourke's 3-year campaign to break her. Whip scars crisscrossing her back in raised ridges, burn marks from silver brands on her ribs. The word traitor seared into her left shoulder blade. She was skeletal from calculated starvation, her clothes, what remained of them, hanging off bones that showed too clearly through scarred skin. But her mind was clear, clearer than it had been in months. Something in her bones hummed, building like pressure before a storm. She'd felt it growing for weeks now, thrumming under her skin, warming the silver chains until they didn't burn quite so badly. She didn't understand it. She only knew it was waiting. The stairs ended, torchlight blazed ahead, and beyond it, the roar of hundreds of wolves gathered to watch her die. The guards shoved her through a wooden door onto the execution platform. Ancient wood, worn smooth by centuries of blood. The entire northern pack crowded the courtyard, pressing close, their faces painted gold and shadow by torch fire. Some jeered. Most watched in hungry silence. Public executions were entertainment, and Rourke had promised them a good show. The Alpha King himself stood 10 feet from the execution block, resplendent in ceremonial armor that caught the light like dark water. His arms were crossed, his expression bored. He'd been waiting 3 years for this moment, 3 years of trying to break her in those dungeons below, trying to force submission, trying to make her accept his claim. She'd refused every time. Now, he would erase her entirely. Tior, the executioner, waited beside the block, massive shoulders blocking out stars. He was twice Kida's size, thick with muscle, his hands scarred from a lifetime of killing. The axe he held gleamed silver in the torchlight, its edge sharp enough to split bone in a single stroke. The guards forced Kida to her knees on the platform. Wood bit into her kneecaps. Tior stepped forward and yanked her head back by her matted hair, exposing her throat. Pain flared through her scalp. The crowd roared approval. A herald stepped forward, unrolling a scroll with practiced ceremony. Kida Nedach, Omega of no standing, you are charged with refusal of Alpha claim, treason against the crown, and willful defiance of your king's authority. The sentence is death. Do you have any final words? All Code 4 said no to the king. Kida felt that strange humming in her bones intensify, spreading warmth through her chest. Her grandmother's voice echoed in memory, a whisper from childhood. Moon blessed, little one. Our blood carries power, the Alpha's fear. She started laughing. The sound cut through the crowd's noise like a blade. Wolves fell silent, confused. Even Tior's grip loosened slightly. Laughter wasn't fear. Laughter wasn't submission. Laughter was wrong. What's funny, Omega? Rourke's voice cracked across the platform, sharp with irritation. Kida lifted her eyes to those cold, cruel eyes that had watched her scream and smiled through split lips. Blood stained her teeth. You are. You think I'm afraid of death? I've been dead for 3 years. You just never noticed I climbed back out. Something flickered in Rourke's expression. Uncertainty. Perhaps the first he'd felt in decades. Do it, he commanded, voice harder now. Urgent. The axe rose. The world slowed, and the thing in Kida's bones erupted. Silver light exploded across the platform, blinding and violent. The chains shattered, links bursting apart with sounds like gunshots. Power flooded her veins, ancient, furious, remembering. Moon-blessed magic that Alphas thought they'd genocided 3 centuries ago. They were wrong. Kida moved before thought, faster than any wolf could track. Tior's axe was in her hands, torn from his grip before he processed she was free. One fluid motion: spin, rise, strike. Muscle memory. From 1,000 years of moon-blessed warriors flowed through her. The blade buried itself in Rourke's chest, with a wet, final sound. His eyes went wide. Shock, disbelief. Blood poured over ceremonial armor, black in the torchlight. He reached for the axe handle with trembling fingers, unable to comprehend how this had happened, how an Omega in chains had just killed the most powerful Alpha in the Northern Territories. 2 seconds. That's all it took. Kida leaned close and whispered, "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Rourke collapsed, dead before he hit the blood-soaked wood. The pack went silent. Their king lay dead on his own execution platform, and the Omega he'd tried to murder stood in his blood, holding the weapon, glowing with silver light that shouldn't exist. Kida turned to face the crowd, shattered chains pooling at her feet, power blazing through her scarred body. Anyone else? No one moved. No one breathed. The revolution had just begun. The pack stood frozen. A courtyard full of predators turned to stone. Rourke's blood pooled across ancient wood, spreading dark and final. The silver light still emanated from Kida's skin, casting shadows that danced like living things across hundreds of shocked faces. Commander Helga's hand dropped to her sword hilt, fingers curling around leather grip. Her eyes moved between Kida and the corpse at her feet, calculating odds, weighing options. Beside her, Audrey's face twisted with conflict, her warrior's oath warring with the impossible thing she'd just witnessed. Kida knew she had seconds, maybe less. Shock would break like glass, and then they'd come for her, a coordinated attack to eliminate the threat before it could spread. She'd survived 3 years by understanding how predators thought. She didn't wait. Garrett, Marcus, Thane. Her voice cut through the silence, naming them one by one. Come forward. 3 enforcers in the crowd went rigid. She knew their faces better than her own, had memorized every line while they'd worked on her in those underground chambers. Garrett, with the branding iron. Marcus, who preferred his fists. Thane, who'd laughed while he broke her fingers, one by one, asking if she was ready to submit yet. I said, come forward. Power thrummed in her words, making wolves whimper. You have no authority, Garrett started. Kida moved. Silver light streaked across the courtyard. The executioner's axe swung in 3 precise arcs. Garrett's protest died in a gurgle. Marcus didn't even have time to draw his blade. Thane managed to shift halfway before the axe found him. 3 bodies hit the ground before the pack could draw breath. Kida stood in the center of the carnage, blood dripping from the axe, her scarred body blazing with moon-blessed fury. I remember, she said softly, but every wolf heard it. I know who hurt me. I know what you did in those dungeons when you thought no one would ever call you to account. Wolves pressed backward, creating space around the bodies. Some looked ready to attack, others to run. The pack teetered on the edge of violence. Helga stepped forward. The commander's sword remained sheathed. She surveyed Rourke's corpse, the 3 dead enforcers, and Kida standing in silver light with a bloodied axe. Her face showed nothing but cold calculation. Stand down, she ordered, voice carrying across the courtyard. Commander, someone protested. Stand down. Helga's tone brooked no argument. She turned to face the pack, shoulders squared. By old challenge law, she who kills the Alpha claims the throne. Rourke is dead. The challenge is witnessed. Kida Nedach is victorious. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some outraged, some relieved, many simply confused. But Helga's word carried weight, and the immediate threat of violence receded like a tide pulling back from shore. Audrey still hadn't moved. The warrior stared at Kida with something between horror and awe, her hand tight on her sword hilt, but making no move to draw. She'd sworn an oath to serve the strongest. That oath had just transferred to an Omega, glowing with magic that shouldn't exist. The fortress, Kida said, locking eyes with Helga. Take me to the throne room. They moved through corridors in tense silence, Kida at the center, Helga and a dozen warriors surrounding her. Not quite prisoner, not quite queen. Something undefined and dangerous. The fortress felt different from this angle. Above ground, walking freely rather than being dragged in chains. The stone walls pressed close, dark with centuries of violence. The throne room's doors opened with a groan of ancient hinges. Inside, torches burned in iron sconces, casting long shadows across a space built to intimidate. And at the center, elevated on a dais, sat Rourke's throne carved from black stone, backed with wolf pelts, designed to crush anyone who dared sit in it. Kida climbed the steps. Her legs shook, whether from exhaustion or the weight of what she was claiming, she couldn't tell. The throne felt wrong beneath her, tainted by the man who'd occupied it, still warm with his cruelty. But she sat anyway, the executioner's axe across her lap, blood still wet on its blade. What am I? The question escaped before she could stop it, directed at the room, at the wolves watching her with wary eyes. This power, what is it? Silence answered. Then footsteps, hesitant, approaching from the back of the room. Milo emerged from the shadows, clutching his leather journal like a shield. The record keeper looked terrified, but pushed forward anyway. "Your moon blessed," he said quietly. "The Bloodline Alphas tried to genocide 300 years ago." Kida's breath caught. Her grandmother's whispers suddenly made sense, fragments of stories told in the dark, warnings about hiding what they were, about the purges that had killed their people. "They thought they succeeded," Milo continued, opening his journal with shaking hands. "The Moon Blessed were Omegas who could wield magic, who had power independent of Alpha dominance. The Alphas saw them as a threat to the natural order, so they hunted them, killed them, burned their bloodlines from history. But they missed one," Kida whispered. "Your grandmother hid well. Your mother hid better. And you," Milo met her eyes, "you survived." The pieces fell into place. Why Rourke had killed her entire family when she was 12. Why he'd imprisoned her specifically after she refused his claim. Why 3 years of torture hadn't been meant to break her spirit, but to kill whatever dormant power might exist in her blood. He'd known, or suspected, and he'd tried to finish what his ancestors started. "You're the last moon, blessed," Milo said. "The extinct power that made Omegas dangerous." Kida sat in that tainted throne, understanding flooding through her like ice water. They hadn't tried to break her because she was defiant. They'd tried to break her because she was terrifying, a walking threat to 3 centuries of Alpha supremacy. No wonder they'd kept her alive. They'd wanted to be sure the bloodline was truly dead before they executed her. They should have killed her faster. Kida descended to the dungeons before dawn. Each stone step downward pulled memory from her bones, the weight of chains, the smell of her own blood, the sound of her screams echoing off wet stone. Her hands trembled against the cold wall. Silver light flickered beneath her skin, responding to her distress. Helga followed 3 steps behind, silent but present. The lower corridor opened into familiar darkness. Cell doors lined both sides, iron reinforced and silver locked. Kida knew everyone. She'd heard the prisoners inside during her 3 years, their crying, their pleading, their eventual silence. The cell where they'd starved her stood open, straw still matted with old blood, the chamber where Garrett had heated his branding iron until it glowed. The chains that had held her still bolted to the wall, silver links testament to 3 years of captivity. But she wasn't alone down here. "Hello?" A voice, weak and female, drifted from the far cell. "Who's there?" Kida moved toward the sound. Her power illuminated the darkness, revealing a young Omega pressed against the bars, hollow-eyed, scarred, branded with the same traitor mark on her shoulder. "How many?" Kida's voice came out rough. "7 of us," the Omega whispered. "Maybe more in the lower levels." 7 Omegas, imprisoned for refusing bonds, for showing defiance, for existing incorrectly in Rourke's world. Kida moved from cell to cell, silver light blazing from her palms. She gripped each lock, channeling moon-blessed power until the metal screamed and shattered. The sound echoed like breaking bones. One by one, cell doors swung open. The Omegas emerged slowly, skeletal, limping, barely believing their chains had actually broken. An older woman collapsed to her knees, weeping. 2 younger ones clung to each other, too afraid to move toward freedom. "You're free," Kida said, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. "What happens to us now?" The first Omega asked, voice trembling with hope and terror in equal measure. The question hit Kida like a physical blow. She stood among the ruins of Rourke's prison, surrounded by broken chains and freed captives, and realized she had no answer. She'd thought only of vengeance, of killing the man who'd hurt her, of destroying the system that had caged her. But after destruction, she hadn't planned that far. "You're free," she repeated, weaker this time. "That's what happens." Free to go where? Helga's voice cut through from the corridor entrance. The commander stepped into the light, surveying the scene with calculating eyes. These Omegas have no family, no pack bonds, no protection. You've freed them into a world that will see them as loose ends from Rourke's reign. Targets for anyone who wants to make a point. Kida's chest tightened. Then they stay here, under my protection. And eat what? Sleep where? You've claimed a throne but not a structure. Freedom without foundation is just exposure. The words stung because they were true. Destruction was easy, she'd proven that on the execution platform. Building something after? That required vision she didn't have. That night, wine arrived in the throne room. Deep red, poured by a servant Kida didn't recognize. She drank without thinking, exhausted from the day's revelations. The poison hit her bloodstream like liquid fire. Kida collapsed, convulsing, her body trying to reject what she'd swallowed. Silver light erupted from her skin, brighter than before, burning through the toxin with moon-blessed healing she didn't know she possessed. It took 5 agonizing minutes, but she lived. Audrey appeared in the doorway, dragging a struggling wolf by his collar. Found him trying to flee through the east gate. Crossa, Moro, the warrior said, throwing the man at Kida's feet. He's one of Rourke's inner circle. Probably has 24 brothers waiting for their turn. The would-be assassin spat blood. You're an abomination. The pack won't accept Omega rule. Kida stood, still shaking from the poison, and drove the executioner's axe through his chest without ceremony. He died choking on his own prophecy. How many more? She asked Audrey. The warrior's expression was grim. Dozens, maybe more. Rourke spent decades building loyalty. They won't surrender just because you killed him. Kida looked at the corpse, at the blood spreading across throne room stone, at the 7 freed Omegas huddled in the corridor beyond. She'd killed a king in 2 seconds, but holding power, that would take much longer, and far more blood. They came at dawn when Kida's defenses were lowest. She'd spent the night wrestling nightmares. Rourke's face, the dungeon cells, the poison burning through her veins, and had only just fallen into exhausted sleep in the throne room chair. The executioner's axe lay across her lap, her only comfort. The doors exploded inward. 12 Alpha warriors poured through, coordinated and silent. 2 commanders led the charge, their faces twisted with righteous fury. All of them had sworn oaths to Rourke. All of them saw his death as betrayal that needed avenging. Kida rolled sideways as the first blade whistled past her head. Silver light erupted from her skin, pure instinct, as she came up swinging the axe. It caught the nearest warrior across the chest, splitting armor and bone. 11 left. They circled her like wolves with cornered prey, spreading wide, forcing her to track threats from all directions. She was fast moon-blessed speed that made her movements blur, but she was one and they were many. Trained warriors who'd spent decades perfecting the art of killing. Just an Omega. One sneered, fainting left. Another struck from behind. His sword caught her ribs, cracking bone. Pain exploded white-hot through her chest. Kida spun, the axe taking his head, but the damage was done. Blood poured down her side, hot and slick. 10 left. She moved like silver lightning, the axe singing through air. But she was still learning this power. It came in bursts, brilliant and overwhelming, then ebbed, leaving her vulnerable. A blade pierced her left shoulder. Another opened her thigh. She was drowning in opponents, taking 2 hits for every one she landed. A commander rushed her front while 3 warriors attacked from behind. This was it, the coordinated strike meant to end her. Kida blocked the commander's blade but left herself exposed. Steel drove toward her spine. Glass shattered. Audrey crashed through the throne room window in an explosion of broken glass and fury. She hit the 3 rear warriors like a battering ram, tackling them away from Kida's unprotected back. Bodies tumbled across stone. The warrior who'd sworn oath to Rourke had just chosen the Omega. Kida used the reprieve to recover, channeling moon-blessed healing into her worst wounds. The shoulder knitted enough to fight, the ribs held. She and Audrey fell into rhythm without words, back to back, covering each other's blind spots, moving like they'd trained together for years instead of minutes. The battle turned savage. Blood painted the walls. Bodies fell. The loyalists realized too late they weren't fighting an Omega and a traitor. They were fighting something far more dangerous. The last commander died with Kida's axe in his chest and Audrey's sword through his spine. 12 bodies littered the throne room. The furniture lay in splinters. Blood pooled so thick it reflected torchlight like dark mirrors. Both women stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, covered in gore that was mostly not their own. Kida turned on Audrey, the axe still raised. Why? The warrior wiped blood from her face, meeting Kida's eyes without flinching. I swore to serve the strongest. You killed my king in 2 seconds. You're it. I don't trust you. Kida's voice was flat, final. Good. Audrey sheathed her sword, the motion deliberate and unthreatening. You shouldn't trust anyone, but you need allies or you'll die. Tonight proved that. You're powerful, but 12 came for you. Next time it'll be 20, 50, 100. You can't fight them all alone. The truth landed like a physical blow. Kida wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle whatever came, but her body told a different story. Cracked ribs, pierced shoulder, thigh bleeding through hastily healed skin. She'd barely survived 12. I won't bow, Kida said. I'm not asking you to. Audrey gestured at the bodies. I'm asking you to let someone watch your back while you're too busy watching the front. That's all. No loyalty. No trust. Just survival. Kida looked at the warrior, really looked. Audrey stood easy despite the carnage, competent and calm, offering alliance without submission. The kind of partnership Kida had never been allowed in Rourke's world. Fine, Kida said finally. Watch my back. But if you betray me, you'll kill me with the same axe you used on Rourke. I know. Audrey almost smiled. Honestly, I'd expect nothing less. News traveled fast. Within 3 days, every pack within 200 miles knew that Rourke was dead, and an Omega sat on his throne. The ravens came first, then the wolves, carrying word of the impossible. The most powerful Alpha in the Northern Territories, killed in 2 seconds by a prisoner in chains. The envoys arrived on the 4th day. They came simultaneously, as if coordinated 3 separate delegations from 3 rival territories, all smelling blood in the water. The Eastern Pack's envoy wore crimson and gold, his Alpha's colors. The Western delegation brought 50 warriors as escort. The Southern representative was an older wolf with calculating eyes and a smile that promised nothing good. Helga intercepted them at the gates, her expression carved from stone. One at a time, she ordered, but they pushed into the fortress anyway, crowding the great hall with bodies and competing demands. Kida sat in Rourke's throne, her throne now with the executioner's axe across her lap. Audrey stood at her right shoulder. The 7 freed Omegas watched from the gallery above, silent witnesses to whatever came next. The Eastern envoy spoke first, his voice carrying the arrogance of someone who believed himself untouchable. The Eastern Pack offers the Northern Territory protection during this transition. In exchange, we require tribute of 100 cattle, 50 horses, and your submission to Alpha Kieran's authority. Protection from what? Kida's voice was dangerously soft. From yourself, Omega. You've thrown the natural order into chaos. Alpha Kieran would restore stability. The Western envoy stepped forward before Kida could respond. The Western Pack makes a more generous offer. We'll absorb your territory, provide for your wolves, ensure no one starves through the coming winter. All we ask is your cooperation. Subjugation, you mean, Audrey muttered. The Southern representative cleared his throat. The Southern pack takes a different approach. We request you present yourself for evaluation. Our council will determine if you possess the qualities necessary to lead, or if you require guidance. 3 demands, 3 different flavors of the same message: bow to male alpha authority or be destroyed. Helga caught Kida's eye, gave the smallest shake of her head. Not here, not now. They weren't strong enough to fight 3 packs. The commander's caution was written in every tense line of her body. Kida stood anyway. Let me make our position clear, she said, descending from the dais. Silver light flickered beneath her skin. The northern pack bows to no one. We don't need your protection, your absorption, or your evaluation. The eastern envoy's face darkened. You're just an Omega. You don't get to refuse Alpha authority. I'm the Omega who killed Rourke in 2 seconds. Kida's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the hall. Would you like a demonstration? This is madness. She moved. The executioner's axe drove through his chest before the words finished leaving his mouth. His eyes went wide with shock. Blood poured over crimson and gold silk. He dropped, dead, before he understood what had happened. The hall erupted. Warriors reached for weapons. The other envoys scrambled backward. Audrey's blade sang free of its sheath. Send him back. Kida told no one in particular, standing over the corpse. Tell Alpha Kieran, if he wants tribute, he's welcome to come try to collect. Helga's face went white with fury. You just declared war on 3 packs simultaneously. They declared war the moment they thought an Omega was easy prey. Kida met the commander's eyes, unflinching. Caution looks like weakness. Weakness invites attack. I'd rather they fear us than test us. Fear. Helga's laugh was bitter. They'll destroy us. Then we fight. The pack fractured that night. Wolves who'd survived Rourke's reign looked at Kida, covered in the envoy's blood, glowing with magic that shouldn't exist, leading them toward war with 3 territories, and made their choices. Half stayed, drawn by her strength or too afraid to run. Half fled to rival territories, believing she was leading them to destruction. Helga watched them go, her jaw tight with barely contained rage. When the last deserter vanished through the gates, she turned to Kida. You're insane, the commander said. Probably. We can't win this. We'll see. Helga stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, she drew her sword and drove it point first into the ground between them. Fine. If we're going to die, we'll die on our feet. Start fortifying the borders. If they're coming, we'll be ready. They came at dawn from 2 directions, coordinated like they'd been planning it for weeks. Eastern and Western packs, 200 warriors each, crashing against the Northern Territory's borders in synchronized assault. Helga made the call in seconds. Split the forces. I'll take east with half our warriors. You take west. That's suicide, Audrey said. We're outnumbered 5 to 1 on each front. You have a better plan? Helga's eyes were cold. We fight or we die. Kida grabbed the executioner's axe. Then we fight. The western border was forest and broken stone, terrain that favored ambush over open battle. 80 northern warriors faced 200 invaders pouring through the tree line like a flood. Traditional tactics said they'd be overrun in minutes. Kida wasn't traditional. She hit the enemy front line like a silver comet. Moon-blessed power erupted from her skin, turning night to day, burning so bright wolves had to shield their eyes. The executioner's axe sang through flesh and bone, moving faster than any warrior could track. She cut through the invaders like they were paper, but the magic was barely controlled. Sometimes she killed cleanly, head severed, chest split, quick deaths. Other times the power surged wild, obliterating enemies in bursts of silver light that left nothing but ash and scorched earth. She couldn't predict it, couldn't control which would happen. Audrey fought at her side, covering the gaps Kida's fury left open. The warrior moved with practiced efficiency, her blade finding throats and hearts, while Kida carved devastation through the center. They were brutal poetry, destruction, and precision, working in tandem. The battle turned into slaughter. The Western pack hadn't expected moon-blessed magic, hadn't expected an Omega who moved like lightning and killed like a storm. They broke, retreating in chaos, leaving half their number dead or dying in the bloodied snow. But victory came with cost. Kida stood in the center of the carnage, power draining from her body like water through cupped hands. She was shaking, barely able to hold the axe. Around her, dozens of northern warriors lay dead good wolves who'd stayed loyal, who'd believed in her strength enough to fight impossible odds. Behind her, Audrey collapsed. Kida spun, saw the warrior clutching her gut where a sword had punched through. Blood poured between Audrey's fingers, too much blood, staining the snow black. "I'm fine," Audrey gasped, but she wasn't. Her face was sheet white, her breathing shallow. Kida lifted her surprisingly light for someone so deadly, and ran east, toward Helga's position, toward help she wasn't sure existed. The eastern border was worse. Bodies everywhere, northern and eastern pack mixed together in death. Helga stood in the center, armor dented, face splattered with blood, sword still raised. Her warriors had held, but barely. The eastern pack had retreated, leaving their dead behind. Helga saw Kida carrying Audrey, and her expression tightened. How bad? Gut wound. She needs a healer now. We don't have a healer. Helga's voice was flat. We have field medicine and prayers. They worked on Audrey in a commandeered tent, packing the wound with cloth that immediately soaked through. The warrior drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling orders to soldiers who weren't there. Kida sat outside, the executioner's axe across her knees, staring at blood that wouldn't wash from her hands. Her power was spent, leaving her hollow and shaking. They'd won, but she couldn't remember the faces of the warriors who died to make that victory possible. Helga emerged from the tent, her expression grim. She might live, might not. Hard to say. We won, Kida said, but it sounded like a question. Did we? Helga sat beside her, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. You're the most powerful thing I've ever seen. You killed 50 warriors single-handedly. But power isn't leadership. You fight like you're still chained in that dungeon, trying to kill everything that hurt you. That's not sustainable. The words stung because they were true. Kida had fought with pure rage, no strategy beyond destruction. She'd won through overwhelming force but hadn't considered the cost until bodies littered the ground. Then teach me, she said quietly. Helga looked at her, really looked, seeing past the moon-blessed power to the broken girl beneath. You're serious? I can't keep doing this. Can't keep watching wolves die because I don't know how to lead them properly. Kida met the commander's eyes. You know strategy. I know destruction. Teach me the rest. Helga was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharp and final. Fine. But lesson 1 starts now. Power wins battles. Vision wins wars. You've got the first. Time to learn the second. Audrey was dying. The gut wound festered despite shifter healing, infections spreading through her bloodstream like poison. She burned with fever in the fortress infirmary, delirious and fading. Kida sat beside her bed, helpless in a way that no amount of moon-blessed power could fix. There's a healer, Helga said on the second day, her voice tight. Old woman, lives in the western forest. Rourke exiled her years ago for sedition. What kind of sedition? She treated Omegas without permission, healed the ones he was trying to break. Helga's jaw tightened. If anyone can save Audrey, it's her, but she'll demand a price. They brought the healer at dawn on the third day. She was ancient, white-haired and bent, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. She looked at Kida sitting vigil beside Audrey's sickbed and snorted. "You're the one who killed Rourke?" "Yes." "Good. He was a bastard." The healer moved to Audrey's side, examining the wound with practiced hands. "This is bad. Infection's deep. She's got maybe a day left." "Can you save her?" Kida's voice cracked. "Maybe. For a price." "Name it." The healer's eyes pinned Kida in place. "You killed Rourke. Good. But what are you building? Just another Alpha who happens to be Omega? Someone who'll rule through fear and violence, same as him? Or something different?" Kida opened her mouth, but no words came. She hadn't thought beyond vengeance, beyond making them all pay. Building something? That required vision she didn't possess. "That's what I thought," the healer said. "I'll save your warrior. But when she lives, you owe me reform. Real change. Not just a different face on the same brutality." The healer worked for 3 days. Kida refused to leave, watching Audrey struggle between life and death, her breathing shallow and labored. The warrior mumbled in fever dreams orders to soldiers, warnings about flanking attacks. Her dead king's name whispered like a prayer. Helga came and went, bringing reports of border patrols and enemy movements. On the second night, she sat beside Kida in the darkness. "You wanted to make them pay," the commander said quietly. "You did. Rourke's dead. His enforcers are dead. The Alphas who tortured you are ash. Now what? Die, defending this throne from endless challenges, or build something that lasts beyond you?" "I don't know how to build." Kida's admission tasted like failure. "Then learn, delegate, trust others to handle what you can't. Read. People figure out who serves from fear versus who serves from belief. Turn vengeance into vision." Helga's voice softened. "You're powerful enough to destroy anything. The question is whether you're wise enough to create something." The lessons continued through 3 sleepless nights. How to assess threats, how to allocate resources, how to inspire loyalty rather than demand it through terror. Kida absorbed it all, desperate for anything that might help her be more than just a destroyer. Audrey woke on the 4th day. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on the ceiling, then on Kida sitting beside her. "Did we win?" she rasped. "The battle." Kida's smile was exhausted. "Not sure about the war." Audrey tried to laugh, but it turned into a cough. "Good enough for now." The healer finished packing her supplies. "She'll live. Scarred, but alive. Now about my price." "Reform," Kida said. "You want me to prove I'm different from Rourke." "Exactly. Write new laws, protect the vulnerable, make it so Omegas don't have to hide in forests to avoid being broken." The healer's eyes were merciless. "Otherwise you're just a different monster wearing his crown." Kida looked at Audrey's scarred gut testament to the cost of her vengeance. At Helga, tired eyes, showing the weight of trying to hold chaos together. At the 7 freed Omegas watching from the corridor, still too afraid to fully believe in their freedom. "Okay," she said finally. "We write new laws. No more dungeons, no more forced bonds, no more Omegas punished for saying no." She met the healer's gaze. "I'll build something different, or die trying." The healer nodded once. "Good, because half measures won't save you. Change everything, or change nothing. There's no middle ground." Marcus arrived with 50 warriors at his back and centuries of alpha dominance in his blood. He was older than Rourke, larger, scarred from decades of combat. Where his brother had ruled through cold calculation, Marcus embodied raw brutality, the kind of wolf who'd built his reputation on broken bones and subordinated rivals. "I invoke trial by combat," he announced from the fortress gates, his voice carrying across the courtyard. For the throne my brother built, for the pack this Omega stole. The coalition behind him represented 3 territories, loyalists who'd fled after Kida executed the Eastern envoy. Alphas who believed Omega rule was abomination, wolves who wanted the old order restored. They numbered in the hundreds, watching with hungry eyes. Helga pulled Kida aside. Refuse. Under new law, you owe them nothing. Trial by combat is tradition from a system you're trying to dismantle. If I refuse, they'll say I'm afraid. That killing Rourke was luck. Kida's grip tightened on the executioner's axe. I need to prove it wasn't. You have nothing to prove. I have everything to prove. The courtyard became arena. They cleared the space, drawing lines in dirt, setting torches that would burn until one of them was dead. Hundreds gathered to watch. Kida's supporters pressed close. Marcus's coalition spread across the opposite side. Observers from neighboring packs perched on walls to witness history. Marcus stripped to the waist, displaying a body built for war. Scars crisscrossed his chest like a map of violence survived. He drew a massive blade, the steel catching torchlight. You're just the Omega my brother should have bred, then killed, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. But he always was too soft. Tried to break you properly. I would have just snapped your neck and moved on. Kida didn't respond. Words were weakness. She let silver light flicker beneath her skin, let him see the moon-blessed power waiting. They circled. Marcus struck first traditional alpha dominance, overwhelming force meant to crush through defense. He was fast for his size, experienced, reading her movements before she made them. But Kida had learned. Helga's lessons echoed in her mind. Read the opponent, anticipate the pattern, use their strength against them. She didn't meet his charge head-on. Instead, she flowed around it. The executioner's axe opening his ribs in passing. First blood, Marcus's, not hers. The fight evolved into something brutal and beautiful. Marcus fought with raw strength and brutal tactics, strikes meant to shatter bone, grapples designed to break necks. Kida fought with controlled fury, moon-blessed speed channeled strategically, power used precisely rather than explosively. She didn't just overpower him, she outthought him. When his blade came high, she went low. When he expected aggression, she gave him patience. She let him exhaust himself against her defense, let him burn through stamina while she conserved her power. 15 minutes in, Marcus was bleeding from a dozen cuts. His breathing came hard. His swings had lost precision. Kida drove him to his knees with an axe blow that shattered his sword and cracked his collarbone. He collapsed, gasping, defeated but not dead. "Kill me," he snarled. "Get it over with." "Not yet." Kida turned to the fortress. "Bring them." The 7 freed Omegas emerged, flanked by Audrey and the healer. They walked across the courtyard slowly, heads high, chains conspicuously absent. Each one passed Marcus, meeting his eyes, showing him they were free. "These are the Omegas you enslaved," Kida said quietly. "The ones you branded, broke, treated as property. Watch them walk free. Watch them choose their own paths." Marcus's face twisted with rage and humiliation. "Swear fealty," Kida commanded. "Acknowledge the new order, or die here." For a long moment, Marcus stared at her with pure hatred. Then, slowly, through gritted teeth, "I swear fealty to..." His hand moved. A hidden blade, drawn from his boot, flashing toward Kida's throat. She moved faster. The executioner's axe took his head in one smooth motion, the same weapon meant for her execution, ending the last of Rourke's bloodline. Marcus's head hit the dirt. His body followed. The coalition scattered. Some fled through the gates. Others dropped to their knees in immediate submission. The message was delivered in blood and severed flesh. The old order was dead. Bow to the new or join it in the grave. Kida stood over Marcus's corpse, the axe still raised, silver light blazing. "Anyone else want to reclaim what's dead?" Silence answered. Complete. Final. The revolution had just become permanent. 6 weeks changed everything. The fortress no longer smelled of fear. The dungeons stood sealed behind walls of moon. Blessed magic silver light fused into stone, ensuring no one would suffer in those cells again. The torture chambers were gone, filled with rubble and concrete. The execution platform had been dismantled, its blood-soaked wood burned to ash. Kida sat in the throne room, but the throne itself had been transformed. The blacksmith had reforged it smaller, less crushing, designed for function rather than intimidation, and atop her head rested a crown unlike any other, forged from the silver chains that had bound her for 3 years, twisted and reshaped into something beautiful and terrible, a reminder, a warning. Helga stood at her right, wearing the commander's insignia she'd earned through pragmatism and steel. Audrey stood at her left, still scarred from the gut wound but healed, her role as champion undisputed after Marcus's head rolled across the courtyard. The pack assembled before them. Smaller than Rourke's empire, half had fled or died in the conflicts, but the wolves who remained stood with squared shoulders and clear eyes. They'd chosen this, chosen her. Milo stepped forward, unrolling the new laws written on parchment that had taken 3 weeks to draft and another 3 to ratify. His voice carried across the hall, steady and sure. By order of Queen Kida Nedak, the following laws are enacted. Omegas possess full autonomy over their bodies and bonds. No Omega may be forced into claiming without consent. Magic is no longer forbidden, moon blessed, and all other bloodlines are protected under pack law. Torture in any form carries immediate death sentence. Leadership is earned through merit, not birth. These laws are binding upon all wolves of the Northern Pack, effective immediately. The silence that followed was heavy with significance. Then, from the back, a howl rose. Another joined it. Within seconds, the entire pack was howling acceptance, not from fear, but from something that might be hope. After the ceremony, Kida descended alone to the sealed dungeons. The door wouldn't open, she'd made sure of that, but she stood outside the entrance, remembering. The cell where they'd starved her. The chamber where Garrett had heated his branding iron. The chains that had burned her wrists raw for 3 years. She could still smell the blood, still feel the silver against her skin, still hear her own screams echoing off wet stone. But those screams belonged to a different person, someone who'd believed survival meant invisibility, submission, acceptance of cruelty as the price of breathing. That person died on the execution platform. The woman who emerged was something else entirely. Kida climbed the stairs toward sunlight. Each step was easier than the descent had been 6 weeks ago, when guards had dragged her toward death. Now she walked freely, the crown of chains catching light, the executioner's axe resting easy in her grip. She emerged into the courtyard. Wolves stopped to watch her pass, not with fear, but with respect. The 7 freed Omegas worked in the garden, planting vegetables for winter. The healer sat with younger wolves, teaching them medicine that Rourke had forbidden. Audrey drilled warriors in the training yard, her commands sharp but fair. A world rebuilt from blood and ash. Kida stood in the center of the courtyard, feeling sunlight warm her scarred skin. The brand on her shoulder that once marked her traitor now seemed prophetic. She had betrayed the old order, destroyed it, built something new in its place. Her scars remained physical maps of torture that would never fully fade, mental wounds that woke her screaming some nights. But they weren't shame anymore. They were proof, evidence of what she'd survived, what she'd conquered, what she'd become. The last moon blessed stood in power, crowned in the chains that once bound her, surrounded by wolves who'd chosen her leadership. The Omega who laughed during her execution had become the queen who killed a king and rewrote the world in his blood. Somewhere, in territories beyond her borders, alphas whispered about the abomination on the northern throne. Let them whisper. Let them plot. Let them come if they dared. 3 centuries ago, alphas tried to genocide her bloodline. They'd hunted the moon blessed, burned their families, erased them from history, but they didn't finish the job. And now the last one stood in sunlight, wearing a crown of chains, holding an executioner's axe, teaching the world what happens when you push someone past breaking, and they don't break, they sharpen. The revolution was over. The reign had just begun.